The tallest point on Earth, the ultimate climb, the place where people spend tens of thousands of dollars, line up in the death zone, and risk their lives just to stand on top of the world for a few minutes. This is Everest. This mountain is fascinating, but it might also be the least interesting thing about the Himalayas, because behind Everest is something much bigger than a mountain. It is a wall of rock and ice that shapes the weather of Asia. It is a water tower for nearly 2 billion people. It is a sacred landscape filled with temples, monasteries, and mountain gods. It is a place where people have built farms on cliffs, roads through landslide zones, villages beneath glaciers, and entire cultures around the reality that the ground beneath them is constantly moving. So this video is not about the tallest mountain on Earth. It is about the people, cultures, rivers, religions, and disasters hidden behind the most famous peak on the planet. Because Everest is the celebrity, the Himalayas are the system that created it. And that system is way stranger, way more powerful, and way more consequential than most of us realize. Welcome to Geogronauts. The outside world tends to see the Himalayas through adventure. We see the dramatic summit photos, the frozen tents, the oxygen masks, the death zone. Everest becomes this giant natural trophy, a place people go to prove something about themselves. For a climber, the Himalayas might be a challenge that lasts a few weeks. But for most people in the Himalayas, the mountain is not an adventure. It is home. For the people who actually live there, the Himalayas are the background of ordinary life. They are where children go to school, where farmers plant crops, where herders move animals, where monks pray, where families build homes, and where entire communities have learned to survive in one of the most extreme landscapes on Earth. And the reason life here is so unusual starts with the land itself. The Himalayas exist because India crashed into Asia. Tens of millions of years ago, the Indian plate moved north and slammed into Eurasia. But instead of one plate simply diving under the other and disappearing, the crust crumpled upward. Like pushing a rug against a wall, the land folded, buckled, and rose. That collision created the Himalayas, and the wild part is, it is still happening. These mountains are not just ancient scenery, they are an active geological event. India is still pushing into Asia, and the Himalayas are still being lifted, shaken, broken, and reshaped. For the tens of millions of people living in the Himalayas, they are not just living near mountains. They are living inside a slow-motion continental collision, and that changes everything. In most places, distance is measured in miles. In the Himalayas, distance is also measured in elevation. A village that looks close on a map might be separated by a steep climb, a river gorge, or dramatic changes in altitude because of the region's rugged topography. A few miles can mean a totally different climate. A few thousand feet can change what crops grow, what animals survive, how homes are built, and how people move through the landscape. The Himalayas are a vertical world. Down in the lower valleys of the southern foothills, you will find rice fields, forests, subtropical crops, busy towns connected to the plains. Higher up, the land shifts into terraced farms, stone villages, apple orchards, barley fields, alpine pastures, and eventually, the thin, cold world of snow, glaciers, and high mountain passes. Culture gets stacked with the elevation. A valley is not just a valley, it can be a climate zone, a trade corridor, a religious landscape, and a lifeline. And because flat farmland is limited, people had to reshape the mountains themselves. Across parts of Nepal, India, Bhutan, and other Himalayan regions, farmers carved terraces into steep hillsides. These terraces are basically staircases for agriculture. Narrow, flat platforms cut into slopes so crops can grow where naturally they probably should not. From far away, they look beautiful, like green steps rising into the clouds. But up close, they represent generations of labor. Stone walls have to be maintained, soil has to be protected, water has to be guided carefully from one level to another. Planting and harvesting can mean working on thin strips of land where one mistake sends tools, soil, or people sliding downhill. This is geography becoming culture. The mountain does not simply sit there in the background. It shapes how people farm, where they build, when they move, what they eat, and how much risk becomes normal. And farming is only one part of it. In the higher rangelands, pastoral communities have spent centuries moving animals through the mountains. Yaks, sheep, goats, and other livestock are not just food or income. They are transportation, they are clothing, trade goods, status, and survival. In places where roads are difficult and winters are long, animals become part of the infrastructure. A yak is not just a yak. It is a way to turn grass from the high-altitude pasture into milk, meat, wool, transport, and a connection between communities. In a flat country, movement might follow roads. In the Himalayas, movement follows snow lines, grazing cycles, river crossings, and mountain passes. Geography becomes the calendar. But the Himalayas are not just practical landscapes to the people who live there. They are sacred landscapes. This is one of the biggest things outsiders often miss. To many outsiders, mountains are physical challenges. They are things to climb, measure, photograph, and conquer. But to many Himalayan cultures, mountains are not empty obstacles. They are alive with meaning. And part of that meaning comes from the landscape itself. Rugged valleys can isolate communities for generations, while mountain passes can connect distant cultures through trade, migration, and pilgrimage. So spiritual traditions in the Himalayas did not spread across a flat, uniform world. They moved through valleys, across passes, and around sacred peaks, mixing with local beliefs along the way. The result is a spiritual landscape as layered as the mountains themselves. Some peaks are not climbed because they are considered sacred. Some lakes and mountains are understood as places where the human world touches the divine. Mount Kailash is one of the clearest examples. It is not the tallest mountain. It is not as famous globally as Everest. But for millions of people across multiple religious traditions, it is one of the most sacred mountains on Earth. Pilgrims do not go there to summit it. They go there to circle it. To outsiders, a mountain is something to conquer. To many Himalayan cultures, a mountain is something you live with, pray around, travel through, and sometimes fear. And that last part is significant because the same geography that creates beauty, culture, and spirituality also creates danger. Everest danger is dramatic, but it is also optional. A climber chooses to go to Everest. A climber chooses the risk, pays for the expedition, trains for the climb, and enters the danger zone knowing that the mountain might kill them. For climbers, Himalayan danger lasts for a season. For residents, it is a part of ordinary life. And the danger is not just one thing. It is a combination of many things. Steep slopes, heavy monsoon rains, earthquakes. Each one is dangerous on its own. Together, they create a landscape where disaster can cascade. The ground shakes, then slopes fail, roads vanish, hydropower plants are damaged, families lose their homes, their income. The 2015 Nepal earthquake showed how devastating that chain reaction can be. A massive earthquake struck near Kathmandu in April of that year. The shaking damaged or destroyed hundreds of thousands of homes and killed nearly 9,000 people in the process. But the earthquake itself was only the beginning. Entire villages faced the question of whether rebuilding in the same place was even possible. A damaged road in a Himalayan valley can mean food, medicine, rescue workers, and rebuilding supplies cannot get in. When geography is difficult, recovery becomes difficult too. And this is where the human consequences get even bigger. Because the Himalayas are not only home to mountain communities, they are connected to nearly all of Asia. The broader Hindu Kush Himalayan region is often called Asia's water tower. Its snow, glaciers, and rivers help feed some of the most important river systems on Earth. They may look distant on a map, they may seem like a wilderness of snow and rock, but the water that begins in these mountains eventually reaches farms, cities, and floodplains far away from the peaks. A glacier melting high in the mountains can be the lifeblood of a farmer thousands of kilometers away. A weak monsoon season can have devastating consequences for lower elevation communities across large portions of Asia. A glacial lake bursting in a remote valley can become a wall of water, mud, rock, and debris tearing through communities below. And climate change is making this system more unstable. As temperatures rise, glaciers shrink, snow patterns change, glacial lakes grow, water becomes less predictable. Too much in one season, not enough in another. For people who depend on these mountains, that does not just mean the environment is changing. The future of entire communities changes. And this is why Everest really is the least interesting thing about the Himalayas. Not because Everest is boring. Everest is enormous. It is deadly. It is iconic. It deserves its reputation. But Everest is only one point in a much larger story. It is the famous peak that gets photographed, climbed, commercialized, and turned into a symbol. But the Himalayas themselves are something far more powerful. They are a homeland, a water source, a climate machine, a sacred landscape, a disaster zone, and a cultural crossroads. Everest is famous because people climb it, but the Himalayas matter because people live there.